Psychologists have discovered something strange. Once we think we know what's happening, our brains stop looking for other explanations. An older person forgets a detail, acts differently, keeps a secret, and suddenly we start connecting dots that may not belong together. It's called confirmation bias. We notice evidence that supports our theory and quietly ignore everything that doesn't. Tonight's story is a reminder that sometimes the truth isn't hidden because it's dangerous. It's hidden because we never thought to look in the right direction.
My grandfather was not a complicated man. He liked his coffee black. He wore the same cardigan for 20 years. He kept his tools arranged by size on a pegboard in the garage, and he never, not once in my memory, forgot where he put anything. So when he started saying things that didn't make sense, we told ourselves it was age. We told ourselves it was grief. My grandmother had passed the spring before. We told ourselves a lot of things. But the basement, that was the part none of us could explain away. He didn't want us down there anymore, and when we asked him why, he'd just look at us, quiet, like he was deciding how much to say. This was 1987. I was 26 years old. My mother was the oldest of 3 siblings, and Grandpa, everyone called him Pop, had lived alone in that house since Grandma died. The house was on Birchfield Road, small town in western Pennsylvania, the kind of street where people left their doors unlocked and still waved from their front porches, where you knew the sound of your neighbor's car before you ever saw it pull in. Pop had built that house himself in 1953, poured the foundation, laid the floor joists. He was proud of every corner of it. He used to walk me through it as a little girl, point at the ceiling and say, "I made that," as if he was still a little amazed by himself. After Grandma passed, my mother started driving out on weekends. Sometimes I'd go with her. We'd take the long route through town, past the hardware store, past the diner with the hand-painted sign, and she'd be quiet most of the way. Not sad exactly, just carrying something. We'd bring groceries, make sure he was eating, sit with him in the kitchen while he drank his coffee and watched the birds at the feeder outside the window. He had names for some of them. The fat cardinal was Gerald. There was a chickadee he called Ruthie. He'd say, "Ruthie was here early this morning," and my mother would smile and say, "Was she?" And for a little while, that was enough. The house felt the same as it always had, warm, a little cluttered, the smell of old wood and whatever soup he'd made earlier in the week, the television murmuring in the other room even when nobody was watching it. He seemed fine. Quieter than usual, but fine. He kept to his routines, coffee at 6, walk around the block at 8, weather permitting, lunch at noon. He paid his bills on time. He called my mother every Sunday at 7 o'clock, not 7:05, 7. That was just who he was. So when small things started to feel slightly off, we didn't reach for the obvious explanation. We reached for the easy one. We told ourselves grief does strange things to a person. We told ourselves he was adjusting. We told ourselves it would pass. And maybe it would have, if it had only been his mood. The first time something felt off, I honestly almost didn't register it. It was a Saturday in October, one of those gray Pennsylvania mornings where the light never quite arrives. The leaves were down. The yard looked tired. My mother was making soup at the stove, and Pop was in his chair by the window, watching Gerald the cardinal pick at the feeder. The television was on in the other room, some old Western. Nobody was watching it. My mother asked me to run downstairs and grab a jar of tomatoes from the shelving unit. Pop had canned them himself that summer, same as every summer. Rows and rows of them, all labeled in his handwriting. He was proud of those shelves, liked knowing exactly what was there. I'd been down to that basement 100 times, knew the light pull was to the left. I knew the tomatoes were on the second shelf, middle section. I pushed back my chair and started toward the basement door. And Pop stood up. Not quickly, not urgently, but deliberately, the way a person stands when they've already decided something. He said, "That's all right, I'll get it." I told him not to worry, said I knew right where they were. And he said, no. Just that one word. Quiet, calm, but with something behind it I didn't have a name for yet. I stopped. He was already moving toward the door, opened it, went down. The stairs creaked the way they always did, third one from the bottom, then the sixth. My mother and I looked at each other across the kitchen. She gave a small shrug, turned back to the stove. He was back in less than 2 minutes, set the jar on the counter without a word, sit back down, looked out at the feeder like nothing had happened. "Gerald's been at it all morning," he said. And that was that. Later, driving home, my mother said she figured he'd reorganized down there and didn't want me messing with his system. Made sense, she said. He was particular about things being where he put them. That made sense. Pop was particular about his systems. I told myself she was right, and most of me believed it. But something small stayed with me, not a thought exactly, more like a feeling sitting just underneath a thought, not quite breaking the surface. It was the word no. Not don't worry or I've got it or let me. Just no. Direct, final, like a door closing. Pop had always been a gentle man, patient, the kind of person who explained things rather than refused them. In 26 years, I could count on one hand the times he'd spoken to me that way. I filed it away. I told myself it was nothing. But looking back now, that was the moment I should have paid closer attention. It happened again in November. My Uncle Dennis came to help Pop with the furnace, a yearly thing, maintenance before winter. The furnace was in the basement. Pop told Dennis he'd already taken care of it. Dennis said, "Pop, I do this every year, just let me check it." And Pop said it was fine, said he'd had a man out. Dennis asked which man. Pop couldn't say. Couldn't name him, couldn't say when he came. My uncle thought he was confused. He told my mother later that Pop seemed disoriented, that he kept glancing toward the basement door during the whole conversation, like he was listening for something. My mother called the doctor. They said early-stage memory trouble wasn't unusual after the kind of loss Pop had experienced. They said to watch him, keep him engaged, bring in a routine. Nobody mentioned the basement. But I kept thinking about that October afternoon, the way he stood up, the way he said no. That wasn't confusion. That was the intention. The difference stayed with me. And then there was Christmas. All of us were there, my mother, both uncles, their wives, the grandchildren. The house felt full for the first time in a long while. After dinner, one of the younger cousins, maybe 8 or 9 years old, started down the basement stairs looking for somewhere to play. Pop crossed the room faster than I'd seen him move in years. He took the boy gently by the shoulders, turned him around, said, "Not down there, sweetheart, that's not for playing." His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. My mother saw it too. She caught my eye from across the room. That night, after the kids were in bed, the adults sat around the kitchen table, and for the first time. We said it out loud. Something was wrong, not with Pop's mind. With the basement. We decided my Uncle Dennis would go down there. Pop was asleep. It was around 11 at night. The house was quiet. I don't know why I went with Dennis. I almost didn't. But I did. The basement stairs creaked the same way they always had. The smell was familiar, concrete and old wood, and something faintly metallic. Dennis pulled the chain on the overhead bulb. It took us a moment to understand what we were looking at. The shelving units were still there, the canned tomatoes, the tools. But along the far wall, someone had been living there. A cot neatly made, a folded blanket, a small wooden crate used as a table with a coffee tin on top, a pair of boots on the floor, side by side, as if they'd just been taken off. Dennis said my name, very quietly. On the crate, next to the coffee tin, there was a photograph. An old one, black and white, 2 men in work clothes standing in front of a half-built house. I recognized the house immediately. It was this house, Birchfield Road. And one of the men was Pop, young, maybe 30. The other man I didn't know. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting I didn't recognize, someone had written 2 words. Still here. We woke Pop up. He sat at the kitchen table in his robe and looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he told us. The other man's name was Clarence. They had built this house together. 2 young men, veterans, friends in the way that people become friends after they've been through something they can't fully explain to anyone else. Clarence had no family left, no one. When Pop built this house, he'd told Clarence, "There's always a place for you here." And Clarence had held him to it. For 40 years, on and off, when things got hard, when Clarence had nowhere to go, he came back to Birchfield Road. Pop let him stay in the basement. Not as charity. Pop was very clear about that. He said Clarence would never have accepted charity. But as a promise, one man keeping a promise to another. When my grandmother was alive, she knew. She had set the cot up herself the first time. After she passed, Pop hadn't told any of us because he didn't think we'd understand. He said, "Clarence isn't a problem to be explained. He's my friend." And then he said, very quietly, "He was here through Christmas. He left 2 days ago. He always leaves when it gets too much for his pride." He looked at the photograph. "He'll be back in the spring." We sat in that kitchen for a long time after that. Nobody said much. The overhead light felt too bright. Someone had left a mug of tea on the counter, and the steam had long stopped rising. I remember the refrigerator humming. I remember Dennis turning the photograph over and over in his hands, looking at those 2 young men in front of a half-built house like he was trying to understand something that kept slipping away from him. Pop sat with both hands flat on the table, calm, a little tired, the way a person looks when they've been holding something for a long time and have finally set it down. I think we had all prepared ourselves, on the way down those stairs, for something frightening. What we found, instead, was something harder to name. A loyalty so old and so quiet that Pop had protected it from all of us, not out of shame, but out of a kind of dignity. His dignity, Clarence's dignity. The dignity of a promise made between 2 people who had already seen enough of the world to know what a promise was worth. My mother cried a little, not loudly. Just a few tears she wiped away quickly, the way she always did when she didn't want to make something about herself. She apologized to Pop. He patted her hand and said there was nothing to apologize for. But I noticed he folded the photograph carefully when Dennis set it down, folded it once, gently, and put it in the pocket of his robe, like it belonged there, like it had always belonged close to him. Nobody asked him anything else that night. We washed the mugs, turned off the lights. My Uncle Dennis was quiet all the way to his car. I don't think any of us slept particularly well. But something had shifted, not in a way that felt like resolution exactly, more like a room coming into focus. All the furniture was the same, but now you could see it clearly. We met Clarence the following April. He came on a Thursday morning, same as always, Pop told us afterward, knocked at the back door, 3 times the way he always did. Pop had warned us he might come, told us not to make a fuss, said Clarence was a private man, and if we treated it like an occasion, he wouldn't stay. So we tried not to. He was tall, thin in the way of a man who had always been thin, not diminished by it. He wore a clean flannel shirt and carried a canvas bag over one shoulder. He shook each of our hands and looked us in the eye the way people used to, the way that meant something. He didn't say much that first morning. Neither did we. He stayed 3 weeks that spring, helped Pop re-roof the back porch. The 2 of them worked slowly, deliberately, the way men work when the job isn't really about the job. In the evenings, they sat on that same porch in the old wooden chairs, sometimes talking, mostly not. The kind of quiet that only exists between people who have known each other long enough that silence stopped being awkward somewhere around 1955. I watched them from the kitchen window one evening while I was drying dishes. 2 old men, watching the light go down. And I thought about all the years I had looked at Pop and thought I understood him completely. Pop died in 1993. Clarence was at the funeral. He sat in the last row. He didn't introduce himself to anyone. But before he left, he stopped at my mother and shook her hand and said, "He was the best man I ever knew." And then he walked out. We never saw him again. I think about that basement sometimes. The cot, the folded blanket, the boots are placed side by side. The care of it. The way two people can hold a promise between them for 40 years and never need anyone else to witness it. Pop wasn't confused. He was protecting something. And I think, if any of us are lucky, we'll have something in our lives worth protecting that quietly. If stories like this one stay with you, the kind that are less about fear and more about what people carry and why, consider subscribing to Rosemary Whispers. New stories every week, told the way they deserve to be told. Slowly,